Brought to you by BedroomBattlefields.com. This is the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. All right, David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Matthew. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you came on the call there just as I was building that dice tower. I was saying to you off mic that I thought I could do this in 3 minutes. It took about 15. It's just like a little MDF dice tower.
It's really fancy looking.
Have you got a dice tower? It seemed like such a luxury, but I've been won over to getting one.
I do. And I don't know. I think maybe my kid ran off with it. It's kind of cool. It's MDF like that. It's a like a siege tower kind of style. And I think it came with a game that I bought a couple years ago. But yeah, it's real cool.
So I'm going to test it, right? This makes great audio, but the audio will be heard, I'm guessing. So let's go. We've got a D20 here. And I got a 19. So I'm
that's a good result.
Giving that a thumbs up, yeah. So that's a pretty good record so far. So, this was just like, I think it was 20 quid on Amazon. There's some really cool ones on Amazon. There was like a big pre-painted like resin castle with like a dragon on it and that, but it was £60. I just couldn't justify it. So
yeah, that's a bit steep for a dice tower.
Yeah. I'd want always 6s or always 20s, but then I'd play a game like Brutal Quest and I'd need to roll lower, so that would be counterproductive.
Maybe if it comes in with a built-in guarantee for rolls of 20 or 6s, then you can shell that out. But
because I was thinking, well, if you got something like that, you could just put it as part of the terrain, but then I was like, that could get awkward as well, because then you're leaning over to roll your dice and that. So I thought, let's just get this. Funny looking it's like a castle. They sold one that was like Cthulhu as well. Again, I'm holding it up here and you could see it, but obviously the listener can't. But just a wee castle. I wouldn't necessarily paint it up and put it on the table, but pretty unobtrusive. I'm just sick of dice going everywhere. I'm also sick of rolling them on the mat itself and seeing the D20 just rolling off a metal miniature, like giving it a big dunt.
The D20 could roll forever if thrown hard enough, and I think the mats really kind of make the dice go further. So, and I think somebody on the Discord the other day was talking about when you're playing with children, a dice tower or some kind of dice tray is absolutely essential because they can and will cast the dice all over the table. Yeah,
it's like a competition to see how far it could go.
Exactly. Yeah, I've learned from hard experience that my 3-year-old will throw the D6 like a bullet.
So does that mean then that you've played a few games with your 3-year-old?
So I've tried, and I kept expectations extremely low, but I picked up a secondhand copy of the original Hero Quest. I don't know, a while back, several months ago, and because I just decided the new one wasn't for me. And, I thought, you know what, I'm going to get it and we'll just set it up and let him kind of do what he wants with it. And he really enjoyed throwing the dice and moving some of the models around. And then he decided he was going to stack up all the furniture and all the characters on every single tile in one room. And he's like, Daddy, it's full. I'm like, it sure is, bud. It sure is. So, we'll come back and revisit it, I think, intermittently here as we go forward. But he did seem to take to it. He had fun. He calls them his guys, right? So he's like, Daddy, can I play with my guys? And, of course, I say yeah. So, it's great. It's great fun. And we recently played a little game here. I let him take a couple minis out of the painting cabinet, and he picked an orc and an elf, and we call the game Orc and Elf now, and the elf chases the orc around, then the orc chases the elf back around, and we make lots of funny noises and have fun with it.
Great stuff. It's I mean, my daughter now's 2.5, so like I was saying on the last episode, I did get her tentatively paint a miniature the other week there, which was nice.
Yeah.
So, it's quite literally baby steps, isn't it? But she's definitely taking a wee interest. So we'll see where it goes. I did get her for her Christmas. Like, it's not really a hobby thing, but there was a little set. It's like learning maths, which I probably need to do myself because I'm hopeless at it. But there was dice in it and wee counters, and I think it's just the ideas. You roll a 6 and you put 6 chips on this wee stick and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought, well, let's just roll some dice, but our attention span now, I think we got maybe about 50 seconds out of it on the day, so I'll keep gently
Well,
introducing it.
as you said, yeah, baby steps, and I've learned you just follow their interest, right? And if they take to it and are having fun, then you ride along with them, and if they want to put it away and do something else, that's what you do. So, God knows I don't want to force it on anybody, but just exposing him to it and seeing his interest has been really rewarding.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about Hero Quest there and buying a second-hand copy of the original one. Was that a game that you owned back in the day?
So I never owned it. I had a good friend at the time who had it, along with the two expansions that were released here in the U.S., and we played the heck out of it back in the day. I think it was probably one of the steps on my journey into wargaming proper, as it was. I mean, it was kind of the perfect game, I think, for that place and time. I want to say we were probably 8 or 9 years old when we were playing it. And now, come to think of it, I had two friends who had it. There was another friend too. We'd have sleepovers at his house, and that was like the thing for the sleepovers. You break out the Hero Quest and play it until his parents made us go to bed. So yeah, it was a good fun. A lot of good memories.
So that was pretty much your first experience of playing a game like this then, with miniatures, Hero Quest?
Yeah, I can't remember which came first, if the Hero Quest came first or at some point. I was thinking about this. At some point, um, I did play some Dungeons and Dragons around that time. I had an uncle of mine who didn't have kids, who kind of took me under his wing as his own son. And every time he'd come, he'd drop something off for me, and he dropped off one time. At one point, he dropped off a copy of The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings books, along with I think it was Richard Berg's War of the Ring, and like a hex and counter game from the 70s, along with some old Dungeons and Dragons books, also probably from the 70s. And I was, I don't know, 9, maybe 10 years old at the time, and it just, the artwork in them just blew me away. I think I've got a copy here of the War of the Ring, and you show this Balrog here to to a 9-year-old kid, and the imagination just runs wild. And I was hooked. It's sucked me into this world that who knew was there, and yeah. So that and Hero Quest and D&D and whatnot. Yeah, I have memories of playing all those games. Probably starting around 8, 9, 10 years old.
When did you sort of discover the wider realm of like the GW stuff, like Warhammer or 40k or that?
Um, I would guess not long after that. There was a local hobby shop in the town over from mine, and we would go on Saturdays. A bunch of us, my group of friends, we were all kind of doing the same thing, and we would go walk or ride our bikes over there and go spend our little allowance money. And we started going there because they sold. It was one of those all-purpose hobby shops. They sold model cars, tanks, little toy soldiers, all the stuff. And anyway, somewhere in there was this rack, maybe not more than 5 or 6 feet wide, but it was all these Warhammer blisters. And I remember one day, because I never had much in the way of allowance monies. My friends always had more, and so I kind of, I didn't have too much to choose over. I was waiting for them to kind of figure out what they were going to buy, and I saw this rack of these Warhammer blisters, and they were green back then, that bright, bold green color, and it kind of It's like, oh wow, what's this? And I started looking at them, and I saw they were all Warhammer Fantasy, or mostly Warhammer Fantasy, and I was like, this is really cool. This is, this would have been the time of like fourth edition stuff, right? So probably 92, 93 ish. Yeah, and I remember finding these high elf blisters. And I thought this is so cool, and I wanted to use them in dungeons, in our Dungeons and Dragons games. And yeah, I remember asking my friend, "Hey, I just found these. This is really cool. Can we use these in our D&D game?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, sure, yeah, just get them. Oh, it's great. And so I really like the sculpts, and so I started kind of buying those as opposed to some of the other minis and stuff that were out there. And eventually, we were all kind of buying minis and stuff, and we got so many that it kind of felt like natural progression to just start playing battles with them. We didn't really have a formal rule set. We kind of knew, maybe vaguely, we knew the branding of Warhammer, but we didn't know, hey, there's this rule book with rules. We were just, put the minis on the table, and we just kind of improvised the rules, pushed them around, had fun with it for several years, I think, before anybody got a sense that, hey, there's actually a formal rule set out here, and there's like a formal game you can play with it.
So did somebody then have to make the leap and maybe ask for that for Christmas or get it for a birthday or something? Get the actual box?
Yeah. One of our friends, I remember, got the book, and he was like, "Hey, we've got the rules now. We can play official Warhammer. We can play real Warhammer." And so, it was kind of a shock for us, because there were some things we had kind of suspected, I guess, about the rules that were spot on. And then there were other things that were just completely, oh, this is what this means. And, well, this is what this does. And anyway, so yeah, so I would say probably somewhere in junior high, it was kind of when we transitioned into really starting to play, quote unquote, real Warhammer, rather than kind of the impromptu games that we'd been playing.
Did you get into like a club or anything like that at the school, or was it just kind of your friends group that you were doing it with?
No, it definitely was not cool enough to have a club. We were all kind of we were all kind of the smarter, nerdier kids, if I can say that. And this was kind of one of our nerd hobbies, I guess. So it wasn't something I think any of us would have enjoyed proclaiming to the school.
You had to
Like,
be
hey,
careful, eh?
we're gonna have Warhammer Club at 3 o'clock today in room 220. That's the kind of stuff that can get you messed
I'll,
up
I'll
on the
be I'll
bus.
be at the bathroom at 3:30 if anyone would like to flush my head down the toilet.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, and we had several of us. I want to say, uh, kind of top peak of our time together, there was probably 5 or 6 of us who were playing. So it kind of, in our own way, it kind of felt like we had our own little group, and we didn't really need um, to do more than that. And we all kind of lived easily within a mile of each other. So whenever we wanted to play, you just get on your bikes and go to somebody's house and set it all up. Sometimes on somebody's bedroom floor. Yeah.
Did you collect any particular army?
So I started with high elves. That was what drew me in, were those fourth edition high elf sculpts. And to this day, if I could only keep one set of them, those would be the ones. And then at some point, as I aged a little bit, I switched over to dark elves. I don't know if that was symbolic of me heading into my teenage years and teenage rebellion, but it was kind of like, forget these high elves. They're too good. I need some rebels. I need something a little bit darker. And I was getting into grunge music at the time, and so I don't know. There may be a connection there, but anyway, yeah. So I did switch into dark elves and played them for a bit, and I think I picked up bits and pieces of other ones that I just thought were cool. I remember having some Skaven, some undead at some point, but never enough to field a whole army. And My uncle, who I mentioned earlier, he actually got me the fifth edition box set for Christmas one year. My parents couldn't or wouldn't get it. They had actually divorced or were in the midst of divorcing that year, so it was kind of a meager Christmas. There wasn't a lot of money to go around, and I still remember it. Gosh, almost 30 years later, my uncle showing up, and that was the thing I desperately wanted for Christmas that year, and he put it, and I could just tell from the shape of the box, right? I'm like, oh gosh, this is it. This has to be it. And yeah, I actually texted him a while back and said, that was such a special Christmas gift, and I'm so grateful for it. And he actually enjoys it when I still send him pictures of some of the minis that I paint. You know, so
I do remember quite vividly actually opening the box of, I don't know if it would have been 4th edition fantasy, because I also ended up with 40k and Space Marine, Epic Space Marine, but the games, they were sealed with the cellophane, which
yeah,
always took a bit of picking at. Never just went and got a knife or that, just sat with a fingernail for like
oh
half an
yeah,
hour probably.
yeah,
And
you
you'd
dig at
get
it.
that. And then remember, there was, this is just physics, I guess, with any box of this nature, but there was always a kind of vacuum where you went to lift the lid off it, and it took it, like, it slowly slid out. It was like,
Yeah,
seemed to take forever. And then there
oh,
was
it's
just like
magical.
mountains of sprues, rule books, everything neatly packaged. That smell,
Yep,
it never left me. That memory of just opening it and thinking that let's get to work. Within 10 minutes, everything's snapped out crudely, stuck
yeah.
into, like, everything's assembled.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah. No concern about mold lines. I mean, I probably
no,
broke some of those pieces as I was in my, quickness to pull them out of the spro, and
yeah,
yeah, it was. But yeah, there's something to that. I mean, there's absolutely a magic there. Like you said, you have that anticipation as you're picking through the cellophane, and then the slow, as the box slowly kind of comes apart, and then that new game smell. Oh, it's just, yeah. I mean, I still remember it. I still remember it sitting here talking about it. It's incredible.
So did you then? I mean, as you got into your darker teenage years, you became a dark elf. You got into Nirvana. Did you eventually put the games away for a long time?
I did. So that group that I was kind of talking about, that five or six of us, we were playing mostly Warhammer Fantasy and that kind of stuff. Um, we kind of started going our own ways early into high school. And I would say by our in the second year, everybody was kind of doing their own thing. They found different groups and stuff, and we were still loosely friends, but we weren't hanging out and playing Warhammer or Hero Quest or anything anymore. And so you meet new people in high school and everything like that. And I found, met some new friends, and it just happened that they played 40K. There was one guy whose older brother was an avid 40K player, and he liked it and was wanting to get into it. And there was another guy who collected the models but had never played a game. And this was right around the time, probably '98, I want to say, when Warhammer Third Edition was coming out, and so that was all of it was very popular. There was a lot of interest in the game at that time, and so I started playing that with them, and so the fantasy kind of fell by the wayside, and so we played 40K for the remainder of high school. And then as college kind of headed toward college, I things kind of fell by the wayside. There's a memory that I have. So I got a job in high school. I was working. I had more money to throw at the hobby, um, but increasingly less time. As you're doing what high schoolers do, you're going out with your friends, going to parties, you're working your job, you're doing social stuff, and so anyway, I remember the summer before I left for college. That we went to the game store at the malls. Yeah, uh, And I remember buying. I had the money to buy one of these big sixth edition fantasy had just come out, and they had those big army boxes that you could buy. I think for like 200 USD at the time, and I was like, 200 USD. That's nothing to me. I'm a working kid now, and I'm like, I'm going to pick one of these up and bring it with me to college, so I'll have something to tinker with in my downtime. Put it together and paint or whatever. And I was talking with the guys at the store as they checked me out, and I said, yeah, I'm going to college in a few weeks. I'm going to bring this with me, and they just laughed and shook their heads. They're like, son, you're never going to put this together. And I think one of them said, son, I got two words for you: beer and women. And he's like, you're not going to have any time for this. And I'm like, talking about, and they were right. They were right. I brought it there, and it was basically never touched. I think towards the end of freshman year, as school was about to let out, me and one of my friends put together a couple guys and painted them, but that was about it. That was it, and I really didn't touch it again for almost 20 years.
So what year would that have been where you kind of thought, well, that's it for, well, not necessarily for now, you maybe thought that's it for good?
Um, the last the last game I played was a 40K game, and it was I think it was 2001. I was home on a break from school, and my friend Mike, who I was about to go back to school, and he was about to go into the Navy, and we got together for some big, big game. We stayed up all night playing this big game of 40K. I don't know, 5,000 6,000 points aside. Um, and we just played all through the night. I think we actually fell asleep before we finished the game. And I went to work the next day, and he went off to the Navy, and that was the last game of any kind of Warhammer that I played for yeah, probably 20 years.
So I suppose, like, well, before we look at like what brought you back in, what did you think of 40k versus fantasy at the time? And had you played fantasy for a while before you'd even got a shot at 40k?
Yeah, I played fantasy for at least 4 or 5 years. I think before I even knew what 40K really was. I might have been aware of it, but I didn't really know what it was, and it seemed kind of weird to me. Uh, yeah, so I've always been a fantasy guy at heart. I kind of shifted towards 40K late high school because that's who that's what my friends were playing, and so if I wanted to play a game, that's what I had to play. They did get fantasy armies, but the games we played of it were few and far between. I think they did it to kind of humor me, if I'm being honest. So yeah, I but I liked 40K. I mean, it was fun for what it was, and those third edition rules really kind of simplified the system. I do remember at one point earlier, a friend of mine's his parents had got him the second ed 40K box set for a birthday present or something, or maybe Christmas, and we looked at it and we flipped through those manuals, and we were like, I don't know what's going on here. This is this was just beyond us. I mean, we're probably 10 or 11 at the time, and it just was completely over our heads. And we were just like, this is interesting. I think we put the minis together and maybe painted a couple of them, but it kind of fell by the wayside. It was really third edition that I think kind of opened the game up in that way to make it a little more accessible.
So during that period where you weren't involved in the hobby, did you ever have funny moments where you'd maybe walk past a hobby shop or a games workshop or spot a copy of White Dwarf or that? Like those wee times where you thought, oh, I used to do that.
Yeah, there were those moments. So the one I remember is my brother played sixth edition fantasy, and so sometimes when I'd be home on summer break or something, I'd see some sixth edition stuff laying around the house, I'd pick up a book and I'd be like, oh yeah, Warhammer, that's so cool. I remember that. And oh, look what they're doing now with this. And so, yeah, so there were those moments, but I think they kind of became, fewer and further between, as, I went into the 2000s. And, yeah, but it was always there. There'd always be reminders of it. Moving house or something. You'd find like an old white dwarf or something in a box somewhere. I'm like, oh yeah, let's go page through this, and yeah, and occasionally, yeah, you'd see that hobby shop, and you'd be out on a stroll or something. I remember, actually, now that you mention it, I remember being. I was in Scotland in 2016 on vacation, and I was in Edinburgh, and I think it's right there on the Royal Mile or not far off of it. There
Mm.
was a Warhammer store, and it was the first one that I'd kind of seen in the flesh, so to speak, in years. And I just kind of remember walking up and looking in the window. And I didn't want to go in because I didn't want to get, I'm here on vacation. I didn't want to get a sale pitch. I didn't want to buy anything. So I didn't want to waste anybody's time or have to deal with a, what can I sell you today kind of a thing. But I did look in the window, and I think that was when Age of Sigmar was there. And I remember just kind of being like, what is this? The aesthetic of it was just so jarring, to a kid who had grown up on a healthy diet of Warhammer Fantasy. Um, that I was just like, oh, that's weird. And then I remember, I got back home and kind of looking it up, and I was like, oh yeah, they killed the Warhammer world. I'm like, how can you kill a world? But they did, and I was like, and it kind of put me off. Honestly, I was like, oh, that's too bad. It would have been. I remember thinking it would have been nice, at some point to come back to this and pick it up again, but they killed it. So, I guess it's dead. And yeah, so yeah.
So what was the spark then that pulled you back in?
So I think what it was in 2021, my wife and I bought a house, and I had most of my stuff. So I had bought a condo long before then. And when I bought my condo, my mom was like, "All right, you've got your own place now. That's yours. You're not renting. This is yours. You own it." She's like, "You're taking all your stuff, or it's going in the bid." And so I was like, "Okay, just whatever, drop it off." And I I took it, but I threw it all in my storage unit. I didn't know what to do with it. I knew I didn't want to throw it out, but I took it and put it in the storage unit, and there it sat for years. And in 2021, my wife and I bought a house, and all this stuff kind of came to light during the move. All these boxes of minis and blisters and stuff that hadn't seen light in probably a decade, at least, maybe more. And there it was. And my wife and I negotiated that when we were deciding what rooms were going to be what in our house. She graciously allowed me to have a game room down here where I'm sitting now. And it's a sizable room. I could easily set up a 4x6, 4x7 table down here, with room for chairs and everything. And so I was finding boxes of this stuff. I'm like, I've got the space for it. I've actually, it'd be fun to take these things out and play with them again. And sure enough, when I opened those boxes, the magic was still there. Um, I found minis and stuff that I hadn't looked at in 20 odd years, and there they were, still with the paint jobs on some of them. And I remembered, oh yeah, I was in seventh grade when I painted this guy, uh, and it was just, yeah. I mean, it kind of captured a whiff of that magic. I think that you talk about when opening that brand new box set. It was something very very close to that for me when I opened all this stuff up. And we had our son too, and I thought, at the time, my first son was born. I thought, I mean, he's still a little guy, but at some point, maybe he's going to like this stuff. And then I picked up a paint set because none of the paint survived. And so I picked up a paint set. And I said, I'm going to try my hand just painting some of these just for fun. And it proved to be a real therapeutic thing. My wife likes to craft, and so we'd go down into the game room, and she'd do her crafting, and I would paint some minis, some old Warhammer minis, and it was a night well spent. And now that we have two boys, that happens a little bit less. But yeah, it's great fun. It's a great way to kind of let the stress of the day go and kind of wind down.
Did you know that just like every other podcast out there, this show has its very own Patreon? But this is no ordinary Patreon. It's actually the worst Patreon ever. That's right, there's no rewards, no extras, no bonus content, no early access, no shoutouts, and no thank yous. I'll just take the money and quietly get on with making the show. Not that there's any money to take, because hardly anyone's pledging to the thing. Like I say, it's the worst Patreon ever. Find it at bedroombattlefields.com/worst Patreon ever. That's all one word, worst Patreon ever. Now, back to the show. What were some of the first miniatures that you painted then on your comeback, and how was it to pick up the paintbrush again after all that time?
Well, it was with great trepidation that I picked up the paintbrush again, because I think kind of contemporaneous with that, right? So I found all the Warhammer minis. I started looking online, and you find this like, oh, there's other people out here that are doing the same thing, and some of these people paint really well, and it's inspiring, but it's also can be a little intimidating, and so there was a little trepidation when I picked it up, and I was definitely rusty. I'm not a great painter by any means, but but it was fun, and I think the more that I kind of leaned into it, the more I didn't care about what anybody else thought. I was having fun. It was relaxing. It was fun, and it was kind of great to finish a model and look at it and be like, hey, you know what? Like I got this mini 20 some odd years ago, and now I've kind of brought it to life. And so some of the first ones that I did were the Bretonians from the 5th edition Warhammer Fantasy box set. I wanted it to do some of those and show them to my uncle to say, hey, I know I didn't get around to painting them when I was a kid, but I did now. So he got a kick out of that, and I also did some of my old 4th edition High Elf Spearmen, right? To kind of go back to the point of beginning, and that felt appropriate to me. This is really, it was those 4th edition High Elf sculpts that really sucked me into the wonderful and wild world of Warhammer, and so I felt it was a fitting tribute, I guess, to paint some of those High Elves up. Yeah.
When did you actually buy something then, like get new miniatures, and how did you become aware? Like, were you kind of looking online at things beyond the Games Workshop universe?
Yeah, so I think through some of the Facebook groups, I started to discover that there were some other companies out there that made minis that were, I guess, kind of in the same vein or essence of that kind of classic Warhammer Fantasy feel, spiritual successors, if you will, to that. And so kind of seeing what other people were doing and learning about these other companies through them is really kind of what led me to kind of find places like Nightmare Minis. I just got an order from them, and I just came in the mail, and I was looking at it before we hopped on the podcast, and they're just incredible looking sculpts. Like they really capture that essence of the Warhammer that I remember. Another guy who does great stuff is Drew over at Satyr Studio. I think he's out of Michigan, and I've ordered some stuff through him. And his stuff is more in kind of a third edition, like old hammer style, but it's just absolutely top notch. I just love it. And so I've gotten some stuff through him, and I'm sure there's other ones that I've gotten as well. I just I can't remember at the moment.
What about in terms of playing? How long did it take you to actually roll some dice again? And what was it that you played?
So it did take a minute to play a game, and part of that was kind of self-imposed. As you know, back in the day, we didn't paint as much as we played when we were kids. We were happy to kind of push around gray plastic, and we didn't care. We were just having fun, and you could spend to us, in a sense, I guess it was kind of a zero-sum game. You could spend your time painting, or you could spend your time playing, and for us, the playing was more fun, so we tended to do that more. Um, and when I came back to it, I was kind of like, I really want to have painted minis to play with. Like that was something that I always wanted as a kid. And I had some, sure. But I never had like a whole painted army or anything like that. And so kind of coming back to it, that was one of the goals, I guess, I set for myself. And so I wanted to take some time to paint things up, to have enough to play like a full army game of Warhammer Fantasy with, and that took a while. I think it probably took me about a year of painting to get that to the point where I could put two armies in the field. And I'm very fortunate that I have some great friends who are willing to play with me. They're gamers. They play other types of games, kind of like historical war games, hex and counter stuff, and Euros and stuff like that. And they were willing. They were willing to give it a shot. Neither of them had played Warhammer, any kind of Warhammer in any form before. But I was like, hey, I kind of explained it to them, and they're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's give it a shot. And we had fun. I played a game, I want to say in 2022, painted up two forces, just put them on the table, and I didn't even play. I just, I'm like, I'm just going to teach the game to my two pals, and they had a blast with it. And after that, we've played. We had another game for my birthday this past year, where we did a variant on the treasure hunt scenario in the fifth edition battle book, and that one was great fun as well, and they liked it. They had fun with it, and which was great to see. That's what I like. That's how I want everyone to have a good time when we play, and yeah. So yeah, so it's been great, and I'm hoping in the year to come, even though my time is stretched thin now with two little ones, to get some more games in. The more minis that I get painted, the easier it'll be.
So you're very much sticking with the Warhammer fantasy rule sets, or have you dabbled in any smaller scale and newer games, if you like?
Well, that's definitely where my heart is. But I've played some other stuff. Actually, thanks to you, Matthew, and your podcast, I actually took the plunge into Rangers of Shadow Deep. And up until my second son was born back in August of 23, and but up until then, we'd had a regular group playing that once or twice a month, going through the. I think we finished the first campaign in the base rule book, and we were having a blast with that. And it was great fun. And what was nice about that was, as opposed to Warhammer Fantasy, where you need to really carve out the better part of a day to sit down and play a decent sized game. The guys could show up 7:30, 8 o'clock, and we'd wrap by 11, and you'd get a game in.
Hmm.
And it was simple enough that you can sit there, everybody can have a beer or two, you roll the dice, nobody has to have their head buried in the rule book. And it told some great stories. So I really enjoy that system. It's one I'm actually looking forward to diving back into here as our second son hopefully learns to sleep a bit more in the new year than he has been. But yeah, that's one. And I've had my eye on a couple other systems like Frostgrave, Stargrave. I know those are both on my short list of ones to try. Space Weirdos sounds just incredible. Another one that I think would be a lot of fun to dive into.
Do you do much in terms of building terrain?
Um, not too much, but I have done it to kind of take a break in between kind of painting projects where I just kind of feel like I need a palette cleanser. Um, and I don't want to, and kind of you get kind of tired of painting minis for a bit, or you wear yourself out on them, and it's like, okay, well, let's build something. So, let's build a mountain, let's build a forest. And actually, one of the fun things that I've done is I do still have some of my old terrain. My brother, my brother actually kept it for me in a bag or a box or something like that. And gave it to me, and it was all covered in dust and other God knows what. But uh, so I've been kind of doing these terrain rehab projects where I take an old piece out of the bin that he gave me, and wash it and repaint it and reflock it and whatnot. And it's been kind of fun, kind of bring those old pieces that have definitely seen better days back to life.
What are you working on at the moment in terms of miniatures? What are you painting?
Too many, Matthew. If I showed you my painting table, you'd see like 5 or 6 different projects in half complete states of various completion. The one that I really do need to work on is I'm doing that Call of the Crown 3 challenge that DJ runs over on the Crown of Command Discord, and I'm painting Dark Elves. For that because I never really painted any of my dark elves back in the day, and so I'm like, this would be a good motivator to get me to paint a dark elf force that I always wanted to have done as a kid, and so I've got to get a unit done for January, and I haven't started yet.
Leave
So
it to the last minute.
yeah, fingers crossed on that. We'll see. I think there's a dark elf Hydra that I can patch together that should be quick enough to put together and paint here in the last couple of weeks. That'll hopefully get me past the deadline.
Did I see you pop open some old blister packs recently?
Yeah. So I think it was JCB on the Discord mentioned, hey, why don't you film that? And so I just threw together a YouTube channel and put some videos of me cracking those old Warhammer blisters on there, and it was a lot of fun. So it's something. It's not something I'm gonna, I don't have the time to update it regularly, but I do, throw stuff on there as I get it done and as I have the time for. And it was a lot of fun. Yeah, cracking those old ones open. It's a bittersweet experience. I think I was talking with Mark about this a while back on the Discord. It's a bittersweet kind of feeling because on the one hand, it's great to kind of finally open these minis and give them some life after 20, 30 years sitting trapped in plastic. And then on the other hand, I remember there was one. It was one of those old green Warhammer blisters from got to be like fourth edition, and or early '90s. And I was like, I wonder how many of these are still out there, right? How many unopened green blisters of this one particular? I think it was an Empire guy are still out there floating around in the world somewhere. And somewhere someday, someone will pop the last blister of that model, and there will
Yeah.
be no more. And anyway, it was just I don't know. It's an interesting thought. So on the one hand, it's great, but a part of me always feels a little bit sad when I do because I'm like, there's one less of these blisters now floating around out there. So
Yeah, I know it's a funny thing, isn't it? Like, I mean, obviously we're using them for what they're intended for, but I know what you mean. Like, there's one less of these in the world right now. So,
exactly.
where did you get the blisters then?
Um, so it's been a mix. Some of them are old ones that were in my collection that just survived the passage of time in boxes and made it here. A lot of them, though, I've sourced through the various Facebook groups, and the now I haven't bought anything recently from them from the groups, but the prices on those, yeah, they're expensive, but I mean, you look at some of the prices on these new stuff that, these new Warhammer minis that GW is cranking out, and I certainly think most of what I paid is cheaper than what I would be buying it for if I bought it directly, reissued from GW. So yeah, it hasn't been horrible. I ventured onto eBay once or twice and ran away quickly because that really is where the prices are just astronomical. But there's been a lot of really fundamentally decent people that I've met in those Facebook Warhammer groups who are just like-minded folks. For one reason or another, they moved on to other projects or what have you, and they're just looking to pass these on to somebody who is like them. And I've had some great conversations with folks in those. So yeah, it's been a really cool part of actually coming back into the hobby. Is just picking up secondhand miniatures from people and hearing their stories and how they got into the hobby and what they played, and it's kind of cool in a sense because in a way it's like they're kind of passing that torch to you in a way of like, well, here I'm going to sell you these minis that I never got around to doing for some reason. Maybe you can be the one to kind of bring them to life, and so yeah, in a way that's kind of special to me.
As we swing round towards the end of our chat, David, I realise we're getting towards a sort of time limit, but is there anything that we've not covered that you wanted to bring up? Anything you wanted to share as well to point the listener to maybe your YouTube channel or anything like that?
Oh yeah, the YouTube channel, if you want to check it out, is Fifth Hammer. That's the number 5 with the TH and hammer after it. Not a ton of stuff on there, but like I said, there is some stuff on there. Maybe you'll find it interesting. It's mostly going to be Warhammer fantasy stuff and maybe a little bit of 40K stuff in there. So if that's your jam, feel free to give it a look. Yeah, I guess to say, kind of winding things down here, I really did. I did love your hobby manifesto that you posted. I mean it genuinely when I say that it really spoke to me. I mean, it was like kind of looking into yourself, and somebody is, saying words that you feel inside, but you didn't really have the way to articulate it. And just a couple of things that I wrote down that I just wanted to share here were you use the phrase art of patience. And that is something that's it's so spot on. And it really is an art of patience, when you talk about, how you have to spend, you spend these little moments, right? These little weeknights where maybe you get an hour or two in at the paint table or whatever, but that builds over the course of a year. And then you look back at what you did and you're like, wow, this is incredible. And I think it's something, that in today's world, certainly in my world, where everything feels like right now, you're always getting pinged to have your attention pushed away from one thing into the next, like chop, chop, chop. And they, they never want you to linger on anything for too long. I think you really hit the nail on the head with that, with coming back to the hobby. That's something that's really been invaluable, to be able to sit down at a painting table, even for an hour, and give something your undivided attention, right? You throw on the Tabletop Minis hobby podcast and sit down for an hour and paint while you listen to some good folks talk about the hobby. It's so rare, and there's so much value. I think that I get out of it. I think a lot of other people do too. And I think it's worth mentioning. So yeah, I wanted to mention that. I really got a lot out of it, and I just wanted to commend you for that, because I think it's excellent.
Aye, thanks very much. No, it was obviously like partly tongue-in-cheek the way it was written, but the sentiments were, definitely something that I was behind. And you're right, yeah, patience and playing the long game is so important to me. Not to feel rushed, not to feel like you're in any hurry, not even to feel like there is an end goal. I mean, ultimately you're painting an army because it will one day be finished, but to me that's not the point. Just 1 minute at a time, 1 unit at a time, whatever it is. What's the rush? Let's just enjoy it. Most people have enough painted stuff now that they could play a game if they want. And you know what, even if you need to stick a couple of grey guys on the table, so what? Like, it's, we're not going to be in White Dwarf or anything, are we? So
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this has been lovely, David. I've been a long time coming. To invite you on the show after Christmas, I think. So it's great to be able to finally do this. I think you and Mark, you're running another wee live event. Is there a date nailed down for that yet, or is that still up in the air?
I think that's getting finalized this week. If I'm not wrong, I think the final time to vote for your preferred date is this Friday. So if you have a preference on it, go check out Mark's post in there and cast your vote accordingly. I know it's mid-March. I don't have the exact dates in front of me, but I think the two favorable dates were a Monday or a Tuesday, if memory serves. So I think those two are in the running. And yeah, that's something Mark and I, we had so much fun on the Bedroom Battlefields Christmas party that we thought, why don't we make it a semi-regular thing? No pressure, of course, to anybody. It's supposed to be casual, relaxed, and fun. And, whoever wants to show up can show up, and we'll hang out. And Mark and I are going to try and put together a few fun things. I know he's got some interesting ideas in mind that I'm excited for to try out and have some fun with. I know his little game from the Christmas party was such a laugh with guessing the price, and is it more than a Warhammer box set? I still chuckle at that. So anyway, hopefully we'll have the same amount of fun or more this time around. And if there's turnout and people have fun and like it, we'll keep doing it every several months or something. And maybe quarterly, we'll get together on the Discord and do some painting, throw a few back and talk hobby.
Great stuff, yeah. And for the listener, if you're not already in the Discord, get over and get in there. bedroombattlefields.com/Discord is the short link. You'll find it there. Cast your vote. All this talk of votes and manifestos, there'll be some AI transcription somewhere that's putting us in the political, podcast camp. We'll start getting...
Yeah, you'll be getting a knock at your door.
Yeah, I'd probably get pitched for some weird adverts and stuff like that now. So I'll take it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay, thanks so much for your time, David, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Matthew. It's been a pleasure, and appreciate you having me on.
Thanks very much for listening to this episode of the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. If you enjoy the show, then please do share it with someone else you think might enjoy it too. And be sure to check out our Discord community of like-minded hobbyists, which you could find at bedroombattlefields.com/Discord. It'd be great to see you in there.